Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today I am excited to bring you an interview with Trace Tisler, the owner of a fee-only RIA in Ohio. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Trace and his wife at XYPN 15 last year, and I will say that they are truly a dynamic duo. They were so much fun to hang out with. Now, as usual, we went through Trace's career story and chatted about how he came to be an entrepreneur. And I'll tell you, one of the craziest things in his story is that his wife was on her own entrepreneurial path when he went solo, so they were and still are both building businesses from the ground up, which is just incredible. This was a really raw interview, to be honest. Trace was willing to open up and share about the tough road to running a successful business, and that there is no way he would go back and do anything differently. For anyone thinking about going out on their own, you'll want to listen to this one all the way through. As always, you can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/64. And also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. You can interact with other listeners, ask guest questions, and more. All right, here is my interview with Trace. Hey, Trace, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Dude, thanks for having me.
I'm pretty excited because you have one of the coolest firm names in financial planning, and you have just an awesome career story. So I am super stoked that we were able to get you on the show. So we'll keep the firm name a secret. We'll let people, they have to listen all the way through the episode or just Google you to find it out. So kind of kick things off, you own your own firm now. So I just want to hear kind of the story about how you got there. So how did your career kind of start out? Did you get your degree in financial planning? Or kind of what was your first steps into this field?
Yeah, so I went to the Kent State University. And the funny thing about me is in mid-high school, actually moved halfway through high school from Houston, Texas to Northeast Ohio. It was after my sophomore year of high school, and I was not happy about that. If you can imagine, 16, 17-year-old dude losing all his friends, moving to a new place, wasn't super fun. And so I got to my new high school, found out that because of however credits worked out, I could actually graduate a year early from high school. So my sophomore, or it would be my junior and senior year of high school, were actually all smushed into one. And as my wife likes to say it, I Doogie Howsered that crap. So I graduated after a year. Well, actually, however long a high school year is, 6-9 months, whatever. And my goal was to go back to Texas, where I'd been from, and had this huge friend base that I'd established as a high school kid, and go back to, I guess my ideal would have been University of Texas or A&M. But being out of state and not being necessarily the greatest student in the world didn't work out, and was going to be really, really cost prohibitive, even if it did. And so the only other letter of acceptance I got was from Kent State University. And to be honest with you, I do not remember applying to Kent State. It just showed up. And that was kind of like what I had to do when I was 17 years old, and I didn't know anything different. And it was like a half hour from my parents' house. So I ended up at Kent State, which ended up being incredible because the day before classes started, I met my wife. And at a bus stop, she was rollerblading, which was super 2001. I was at the bus stop waiting for a bus that wasn't going to come, because one of the things about Kent State that they really, really, really like pumped up was that we have this super efficient bus system. And it's like next to like Tokyo, Japan, it's the best in the world or something like that. You know, like they were totally selling me something. I went with my new roommate, and we were waiting to go get pancakes. And I met this girl and her friend there and started talking, and the bus wasn't coming. So we just talked, and we became friends. And that's how I met Kate, my wife. So that's where it all started. From there, I got really involved in some student organizations, and throughout my college career, I changed majors like 8,000 times. But at the end, I really thought I was going to get into some type of non-for-profit, NGO, something like that. Something a little bit more on the charitable side. And I figured that I would not make all that much money when I graduated. So I thought to myself, and this is actually like really mature. I was not very mature at that time. I'm probably less mature now.
But made a really mature decision.
At that time, right, I made a mature decision. I don't know how. I was like, you know what? You're probably not going to make as much money as you would like. So you should probably know what to do with that very little money that you do make. Like, you should know what to do with that. So I went into finance. And so it wasn't personal financial planning. It was just finance. It was more corporate finance, but definitely parts of it that were very applicable to personal finance. And so I graduated from Kent with a finance degree, business finance degree. From there, I did go into kind of a non-for-profit for like 6 months, ended up not working out. And I got into personal finance through a good friend of mine that I had met. And his father owned an RIA. And it just so happened at the time I was looking at a transition that this guy's father had an employee that was leaving. And so it just was like glove to your hand. Like, just worked out perfect. I got in there and started down my career path.
So what type of work were you doing at the nonprofit? Was it financial related, or was it just in a completely different field?
Completely different field. It was fundraising. It was working with college students. It was, like nothing financially related at all.
And especially at that point, like, there's not a lot of nonprofits out there actually doing financial work. I mean, there are more and more now. We've had, Jennifer Harper on the show to talk about her nonprofit and that sort of thing, but it's so limited right now. So, every now and then it happens. But yeah, so it really just worked out in that way that, like, you had a friend whose dad owned an RIA and you got a job working there.
And I had good credentials and I could fit in. Yeah.
So was it, kind of your standard comprehensive financial planning firm, or were they, just on the investment side? Like, what kind of work were you actually doing at that firm?
Yeah. So typical story, right? You go in as what they would usually call like an analyst. And so the firm was very planning focused. But like most firms, the majority of revenue came through investment management. So it was really good in the sense that their planning focus was so high. But I think this is something that is maybe changing in our industry, that you can be very planning focused, but when the vast majority of your revenue comes through investment management, what's your natural proclivity going to be? You're going to become more of an investment management firm than a financial planning firm. And there's nothing wrong with that. 3 years doing this, totally understand it. But the good thing was that they did have that focus, even though that wasn't their major revenue source. Like, they really emphasized that. And I fell in love with it. I love the planning side.
So you're 22, 23 years old when you got that job, because you said 6 months at the nonprofit?
Yeah, probably 22, 23, exactly. Yeah.
Did they encourage you to get the CFP? Did you do that on your own? Kind of what was your process to getting those credentials?
Totally. So the two principals at that firm were CFPs, and they were really early CFPs. It used to be, I don't know if it's still this way, maybe Alan, like your CFP number is like sequential. So they had some like really, really stinking low CFP numbers, like
like double digits, 38.
Right, exactly. Like super low. So yeah, they came about it that way, and they got their CFP very early on, and they were really proud of it. And I'm really proud that they are really proud of it. So as my, time there progressed and I progressed, it was a natural step in my career at that time to go for it. So yeah, they definitely encouraged me. They supported me. There was definitely financial incentives. They made sure that it wasn't going to be a burden on me financially to do it, but they also made me have skin in the game, which I totally appreciate. So yeah, I started studying. It took me about 2 years to go through the classes. I did it online through Boston University. So I studied for like 2 years, and along with a good friend of mine who was doing similar stuff. Then you get done with those classes, you're like, oh yeah, I got to take this huge freaking test. I got to remember all this stuff I learned 2 years ago. So then it was another, I don't know, call it 6 months or something of, you get the books and you go through everything that you're supposed to learn. Then I took the test. And at that time, man, it was like you didn't find out for months if you'd passed or failed.
Yeah, it was like 6 to 8 weeks. I was the same way. We just sat around waiting for it.
Right.
And by the time you find out, it's halfway to the next test date. You've got like 6 weeks to prep. So I was in that, like, if I didn't pass, I'm never taking this stupid test ever again.
And of course you walk out like, oh my gosh, I bombed that so hard.
Oh, the people now are so lucky that they find out immediately if they passed or failed. But, for folks out there, I think it was the March exam. One of the exams this year, last year, they just like randomly the results didn't show up and it just said like, you'll find out in 6 weeks. So for anybody out there that just happens to get in this random situation where you don't know the answer, we all thought we failed and many of us passed. So just know that that's standard.
I was so convinced I failed. So convinced.
Oh, yeah. So did you get married while you were at this firm or did that come at a later date?
Yeah, I did. So I think I started there in like 2006. And then I got married like a year or so later, something like that. Oh my gosh, my wife's going to kill me. I know it's November 1st. I don't remember. I think it's 2008. Yeah, November 1st, 2008, I got married. So I've been there about 2 years.
And we're going through the CFP educational process while going through the wedding planning process.
Yeah. And my wife's great. Like, she just knows me pretty well. So that kind of stuff, this is horrible to say, but I'm not a great planner in the sense of event planning. Don't even ask me. I don't know. My friends, we go on fishing trips all the time. And just by the nature of what I do, I'm always the designated money guy. I make sure everyone's even at the end of the trip. They don't ask me to hey, we need to get flights to here. We need to book this site. We need to do this. They're smart enough to know, don't ask Trace. And I feel bad about it, but I also know, the money's easy for me. I can figure out Excel pretty darn good. We'll just make that work. And that's my contribution. So planning's not my big deal when it comes to event planning. So yeah, we did get married. And then I was going through, I think I had started the studying process before we got married. So I was going through it during event planning. And then, I didn't get the CFP. I didn't take the test until maybe a year after we'd been married.
Okay. It's amazing the amount of patience it takes from our significant others to be able to put up with all of this process, but well worth it in the end, hopefully. So what type of work were you actually doing there? I mean, you said you got hired kind of in that assistant paraplanner role. You were sitting for the CFP. Did you progress on to lead planner, or were you kind of stay stuck in that paraplanner role while you were going through that?
I'd say I was stuck somewhere between lead planner and purgatory. So this firm I was at is can't give them enough love. But it was, in a lot of ways, a very typical story of older male guys. And I was the young generation, along with two other younger generations, of which I was the youngest. The other two happened to be relation of the main owner. So it was me and two sons, and I got along with them so good, great friends. Happy to see them, talk to them whenever possible.
So working there with two sons, did you kind of see the writing on the wall that they were going to kind of inherit the keys to the kingdom and you were going to get pushed out? Or do you think there was an opportunity there to kind of be an equal? I mean, it's got to be hard working inside of a family dynamic like that.
Yeah, dude, it's super weird. Yes and no, because when you get that involved with people that you really like, things get blurred, right? So obviously, if the majority owner brings in his two sons, they're going to be owners at some point. And I had Not that I was blood, but I was like, I don't know this and I don't know what they think of it, but like I felt totally included, which really speaks highly of that family. And so I had like ultimate job security, right? But who knows how that stuff works out. And my boss was the most fair man I've ever worked for in my life. Not that I've worked for that many, but I also know he was like a totally upright guy. And so I was never scared of being like ripped off or anything like that. But at the same time, what really was kind of like the straw on the camel's back that kind of broke it for me was that it was just a different personality, because I tend to be kind of a hillbilly. And my wife's really mad. Kate will say to me all the time, she goes, "You tricked me into marrying you." I tried as hard as I could not to marry my dad, but I ended up marrying my dad. And so it's just like, I don't know, like I am not your typical financial advisor in the sense that like, and maybe this is like a bad taste I have in my mouth, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not where I fit in life. Country clubs and shaking babies and kissing hands or whichever way it goes. That's not my gig in life, man. I feel so awkward and sweaty in that stuff. But get me outside, give me a job to do, like get my hands dirty. We'll be friends forever. And that's kind of my personality. And that wasn't necessarily the route or the personality that fit that particular firm, I feel. And not that I couldn't have been included, but I just know that like in the long run, I was always going to be maybe like the awkward child, right?
Yeah, it's so hard to admit that like this amazing firm, these amazing personalities, and all these people you get along with may not be the right fit. And I think so many people run into this. I mean, I remember a conversation with my dad when I was leaving my first firm, when I was kind of in that same situation where I was like, this should be perfect. And he was like, why are you walking away from like the golden opportunity? And you're like, but it doesn't feel golden, even though it looks like it. And it's hard to explain that feeling.
Yes. It's like, and I look back on it too. So one of the big things, if anyone out there is listening, like, what's it going to be like? Especially if you just walk away. So I know, Alan, you kind of like, your story was a little bit more like you were kind of given the opportunity to walk away in a very like politically correct way to say that. Like I chose it, right? And I had in what my mind is like ultimate job security. Like I was locked in, no problem. And I threw it all away in a lot of people's eyes. Like your dad was saying, like, why would you ever go away? My dad said the same thing. Like the night I told him, I was like, yeah, I'm going to quit tomorrow. He's like, I will come down to your house, Trace, and talk you out of this. I was like, you can, but don't, because you can't. Like, there's nothing you can do. And it wasn't that like a horrible thing, but it was just like, it had bubbled up so much for me that I just needed to do something different, that I just had to. I had to physically, mentally, spiritually, like I had to do something different. Right or wrong, I had to try something out for my own. And so I made the leap and I did it. And I look back, I'm almost 3 years in now. In October of 2016, it'll be 3 years since I've had a paycheck from a quote unquote real job. And we'll talk about this later, probably, because I am the realist in this. It has been much harder than I have ever imagined it would have been. But I still don't regret it. And it's made me who I am.
Yeah, and I know you probably have had this feeling. I had this feeling where every now and then when things get really hard, kind of it feels like it hits the fan. You look back and you're like, did I make the right call? Should I have stayed there? Should I? But when you kind of come out of that fog, it's like, nope, you know you made the right decision. Because when you make a gut call like that, there's something telling you to leave. I think the danger is staying and not listening to your instinct. So,
yeah. Okay. So like you mentioned at the beginning, like the 9 to 5, right? Like it was definitely a 9 to 5, a very, very flexible 9 to 5 with great benefits, and not only like insurance and stuff like that, but also financial benefits. Obviously, I had a salary, but also like it was easy peasy, right? And why would I do anything different? Take the easy route, man. Take the easy route. And I don't know. There's something in me maybe it's the entrepreneurial spirit. Let's hope so. Maybe that's what it is. But it's like you have to be your own man. You have to do your own thing. You have to abide by your gut, by your consciousness, not the right word, conscious. Like you have to prove to yourself who you are.
And recognize that sometimes you can't explain it, and for folks that are out there, I was just talking to a guy the other day that is in the middle of a succession plan. He's got the keys to the kingdom, the golden ticket. And he's like, Alan, it doesn't feel right, but I don't know why. I can't explain it to anybody. And I'm like, I get it. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what? This is amazing on paper. This is an amazing situation. I get all that, but it's not right for me. And I know for me personally, I just know enough, show my Southern roots, but I just know enough old timers that spent their life taking the safe route, and none of them recommend the safe route. No one that seems to have actually taken that route recommends it. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but all right. So you chose to make the leap. Now your wife is also an entrepreneur and business owner. So did she own her own business when you were going solo, or did that come later?
No, my gal owned her own business before me.
Okay. So what does she do, or what was she doing at the time, I guess?
So Kate, my wife, started this little business called Paleo to Me. And you can relate to this, Alan. CrossFit has been a big part of our adult lives and has changed our bodies a ton. Not only our bodies, but our community, who we hang out with, our friends, our outlook on life, our drive, our ability to recognize that you can do so much more than you think that you are capable of, like that ability to push yourself beyond yourself. And so we got really involved with CrossFit probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And her story is, I didn't want to cook dinner for Trace anymore. Not that that was a requirement of our marriage, but she's like, that's just not my thing. And so she's like, how can I get somebody else to cook dinner? That would be awesome. So she started this business along with our business partners that makes fresh, prepared, never frozen paleo meals that get delivered to 30 some odd gyms throughout Northeast Ohio. And it was kind of like one of those things where she never invested $1 in it, and it was profitable from day one. So one of those businesses I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so wicked smart. Why doesn't my business work like that?
Yep.
So it just worked. And we've got these great business partners that we started it with. He happens to be a corporate chef along with working at a food distributor. So we had some good industry connections through our business partner. And Kate's really good at organizing events. So opposites attract. Don't ask me to organize any event. You want an event? Ask Kate. She'll do it. And so it just started, man. And we just put it out there. We had a little tasting at a friend's house. We're like, we'll start it. It was kind of in the beginning of December. We'll start this business up January 1, whatever. They're like, we want this now. Give it to us. And so the next weekend, we were totally trying to find some local kitchen to rent. And we did it all ourselves, total bootstraps. Ordered the food. We hauled the food in the back of a truck to the kitchen, cooked it all, plated it up. And then once that was all done, we delivered it to the 2 gyms that we started with. And so then it just grew from there, man. Just it was crazy.
So how long from when y'all started that business to when you went out solo with a financial planning firm? What was the time gap there?
Probably about a year, I would guess. So she was totally not W-2 employee, not getting a paycheck, making this work. And then I was like, I've always wanted to do a business. And so some of me was like, this is awesome. I get to experiment on my wife and learn all this stuff. And, so I went through business school, right? You learn all that stuff. I'm not that smart. I didn't get my MBA, but I went through business school, and I'm not smart, but I'm not completely dumb either. So you kind of you have this idea that you want to own a business, and not a lot of people, I think a lot of people have that idea. Like, it would be awesome to own my own business, but not a lot of people actually do it. And my wife did it, and I got to help. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. So fun. And then that kind of gave me the courage.
You say courage, and I think that's exactly right. Like, it lets you see it. It lets you kind of test run. What does it really mean? Because I think a lot of people say they want to be a business owner without really understanding what it means to own a business. And that's like, whenever you start a financial planning firm, you don't seem to do a whole lot of actual financial planning. You do a lot of running business and marketing.
That's something we should talk about, because expectations and reality never match up when you own your own business, or two of them in our case.
That's a great point. And, and I wonder if, getting the taste of entrepreneurship and seeing your wife work, that, she can work as hard as she wants. She can scale back if she so chooses. Kind of companies like that can be as big as you make them, but it can just be a lot of fun to experiment with and that sort of thing in that sort of business. So, all right. So you make the leap with a wife that owns her own business. So we're already into the most business coaches would slap you across the head because, you need to wait until your wife's business is producing a really steady income for you to go solo. And of course you didn't, because none of us, seem to have that kind of patience. So you decide to go solo. Why? I mean, were there other job opportunities? Were there anything else pulling you? Or it was just like doing your own thing was the way you were going to go, and kind of had blinders on? There really wasn't anything else in your way.
So at that time, we were in our late 20s, no kids, no debt other than a mortgage and maybe a car payment, but nothing income-wise. It was minimal. I did have other job opportunities, but they weren't necessarily the right fit. So like you, Alan, if I had to go out and sell product, I'd just jump off a cliff.
Yeah, there's no way.
I'm not going to do that. Not going to happen. Sales is my worst quality. I am the world's worst salesman. I will stick my foot in my mouth so hard, because I don't know if it's because this is going to sound really what's the right word? Altruistic or something, but I can't tell a lie. I tell the truth too much. Is what it really comes down to. And I've lost prospects. Hey, here's what you're going to pay me. And that's just kind of the nature of being a fee-only advisor. If you're really honest, hey, I'm worth this, and here's the dollar amount that you're going to pay me. And when people see that dollar amount and it's not hidden in some type of insurance product or mutual fund or something like that, and they see it's thousands of dollars potentially, that doesn't always fly for them. It gets real.
Sure, it gets real.
I just tend to be really open and honest about that. And I don't pull any punches. I think I'm worth what I'm worth. I think I'm good at what I do. But I think that also has cost me clients or prospective clients in the past. Yeah, so I kind of forget the rest of the question you were asking.
No, that's exactly it. It's just kind of understanding what was out there for you. But you made an interesting decision. I alluded to it earlier. You have one of my favorite firm names in financial planning. So you took a pretty extreme route in naming your firm Epic Financial. What drove that decision? Because I know a lot of advisors would turn their nose up to going with a name like that. So what drove your decision to just go that far with your branding and kind of with what you were trying to build?
Yeah, so I guess when I started, I knew that I didn't know where I was going. And I still don't completely know where I'm going with this, as far in as, am I going to make it a huge firm that has multiple offices outside of my regional area? Is it going to be national? Is it going to be statewide? Something like that. I don't know. I'm totally open to it, and I'm kind of seeing where it goes. But at the time, I knew for a fact that I didn't want it to be associated with my last name. I know that obviously when you're starting something, and I started completely from scratch, took no clients. I honored my non-compete, I wasn't even interested in that. I didn't want to get into that, like whether legal or whatever. And I like really love the people that I used to work for. So it wasn't something like, I hate you, I want to take your clients that I help. Nothing like that. Like I was just starting from scratch. But I knew that I didn't want it to be from day one, even though it technically is and was and will be for probably the next at least year or two, heavily tied to my existence. I didn't want to start it with that dependency with a name, because no matter who's running Epic Financial, it's not associated. I don't want it to be associated with just one guy. Like I want to, obviously, like I started it. I'll be the CEO, I'll be the president until it becomes obvious that I shouldn't, or better yet, it becomes advantageous for me not to be. Like, let's just start from day one with that assumption that hopefully I can build something that works myself out of a job. And then when that happens, we don't have to worry about any type of name change. We don't have to worry about the business being so tied to me that to get any value out of it, whether it's just an income for myself or the potential sale value of what I'm doing, like, let's just remove that from the beginning and not make it while it is in a lot of ways still like a solo firm and a very, we call it like a lifestyle firm. I'm very, very open to that changing. And like, to me, it was just like, let's not deal with that stuff. Let's make it easy from day one.
Did you have kind of a target client in mind that you wanted to work with? And I'm curious just if the name kind of played into, you wanted to work with CrossFitters or something like that, or was it, kind of disconnected from that and you just thought the firm name was kind of cool?
The firm name is Epic Financial. And so
it's epic.
It's epic. It's totally epic. And so there's a couple reasons I called it that. One, because a few years ago, that was a very popular, like, kitschy phrase that everyone was saying, like, oh, that's so epic. Oh, epic fail, epic win, all that stuff. And I kind of I usually totally remove myself from that type of, I call it Valley Girl type of like slang or whatever. But as I was going through it, first of all, it's a real bitch to figure out what the heck you should name your firm. It's so hard.
It's so true.
Like, you see people like, oh my gosh, that's a great name. Like, how did they think that up? And if you're the one doing it, it's so hard. At the same time, it kind of has this deeper meaning, at least to me. And this might be like, I don't know, what do you call it? Like hippie or something. Like, I knew it was either going to be an epic win, like an epic great thing, or an epic fail. And I really have this like spot in my heart for epics. And not like, it's kind of like an epic to me would be, and this may not be right, so all those literary people out there, but like Moby Dick. An epic to me is this like big long novel. And it's not this like, it's something that evolves. It's not this short little story. It's an like it evolves over time. It's not short story. It's a long process. And then combine that in my mind when I was doing it. And I remember standing in line at the DMV thinking about this, because I started this from right around my birthday, which is in October. So I had to go to the DMV and renew my plates and all that stuff. I was standing there like, what should I call this thing? It's like, oh, it's going to be an epic fail or an epic win. I don't know, but all I know is it's going to be epic. It's going to be, in my life, a very long story that's either going to produce wins or losses. And so it just seemed very fitting for our vocabulary at that time, for what I was trying to accomplish, and, really what it became. Because when you start something like this, you don't know if you're going to make it or not. And so really you're at this, like, at the edge of a cliff, and like, are you going to jump and fly, or are you going to jump and fall? And who knows? And either way, whatever you do, it's going to be epic in the good way or the bad way. And let's cross our fingers and hope to hell that it's the good way. So that's kind of where the name comes from.
I think that is the best explanation of entrepreneurship ever. And just, it's such a great example of like, I don't know if people just assume that people have these like epiphanies about these amazing, and they just like come up with amazing firm names and just things like that are just so challenging. I remember when I was trying to name my son, I remember thinking like, he's going to be stuck with this name forever. I remember having that like slight feeling when I was naming the business. I'm like, I can't get rid of this name. And now, yes, you actually can. But eventually the names of firms kind of take on a life of their own and people actually start to recognize it. They lose the like, oh, Epic, I bet it has this cool meaning or, this special thing. It's more just like, you think Epic Financial, what they do because of the brand you've built around it and that sort of thing. But anyway, so you mentioned earlier that you kind of have had the I guess the real life experience, the taste of reality versus expectation. So I guess what was your expectation going into, I guess, firm ownership? Because I imagine for a while there on Facebook, it was always like, here's what, my friends think I do. Here's what my parents think I do. Here's what society thinks I do. And it'd be like those 6 different pictures. And then it ends with the what I actually do. And so that's probably, I don't know if you remember those from Facebook, but anyway, that people were doing all the time. So, but that's kind of how I feel about it. So I guess what was the expectation? Like, what did you dream of, if you can even really remember that long ago, that this process was going to look like?
So I'd like to say I was very mature, but I was very naive. I thought it would be very, very easy to get this up and running and go from 0 to 60 and, maybe get like $5-10 million under management and just rough numbers, 1%, like within a year, be making like 50 to 100 grand a year. Not that easy. That was a false expectation. Man, you gotta check your I don't even care what your expectations are. Like, you gotta check those at the door. Like, I thought it would be much easier than it has been. Other expectations? So like you were saying, like the 6 Facebook things, like this is what my friends think I do. This is what my parents think I do. This is what I think I do. Like, I had to redefine what the heck it was I thought I did. So in a lot of ways, man, I went through this time of like questioning of myself. Like, do you even know how to do financial planning? Do you even know what that means? I had to redefine it for myself because a lot of it was in like the typical, as I've been involved in the XYPN for, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years now. Like, there is a very typical story. Like, you're in your mid to late 20s, you're working at a modestly successful firm. It may not be like a multi-billion-dollar firm, but you're doing something. Basically, your story is like, yeah, I worked with a bunch of essentially retirees that were in the distribution phase of their accumulation, their nest egg. And in a lot of ways, it's very simple. But then to transition to wanting to work with those that are closer to age and you, and actually, like, one of the things I told my boss when I was leaving, I said, I want to help people get to the spot that your firm serves. Like, I want to guide them on that path so that there is a plethora of 30-somethings right now that are going to be your clients in 30 years. Like, I want to help them get there. I want to teach them. I want to give them the advice to get them there. Like, that's what I want to do. And I was really good at helping retirees, I think. But there's a lot of financial planning that happens before that you have to kind of learn on the fly. It's not that I didn't know how to do it. It's that I didn't know how to put it all together. And so I've struggled with that. And I'm still not done struggling with it. Like, putting it together and making it a useful tool and communicating it to people has been my largest struggle. Like, I know what you should do. I get it. I can do the analysis. I can figure it out. It's just math to me. And then you add in, like the salt, the spice of life to, like, account for personal preference and emotions and feelings and things like that. But the hardest part is like, how do I communicate that and how do I make it happen? Because I could look at somebody's financial statement and be like, oh yeah, here's totally what you need to do. No problem. But how do I tell them that?
If only financial planning was so easy that, and if it was that easy, we wouldn't have a job because the robo-advisors would already be doing it, right? Like analyzing a cash flow statement's pretty easy. Looking at a financial statement's pretty easy. It's the actual communication part. But you bring up a really good point, which is something that is frustrating me personally, just as I watch more and more firms kind of getting into the space of serving younger clients. And that's that, honestly, I'm hugely supportive of the CFP designation. I think it's an amazing educational designation and that sort of thing. It really doesn't teach you crap about working with younger clients. Like, let's be honest, like 90% of what it's teaching you is intended for that pre-retiree, because that's been the focus of financial planning. I mean, the word student loan is not mentioned in the entire curriculum of the CFP. They don't teach you how to work with, they don't really teach you cash flow and budgeting techniques. They teach you how to analyze a statement of cash flows, I guess, but that's about it. So it's great that you say that, because I think it's a piece that none of us really think about. Is like, I actually have to go figure out how to do financial planning for young people because we never learned it. None of us ever did.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of that too is like, I've come around on that quite a bit. So one of the best things, and I'm kind of old school, right? They call us the Oregon Trail generation. I was born in the 83. So I grew up, most of my schooling was hard copy, pen and paper. You write your report. And then once I got into middle school and high school, yeah, you could type up a report and print it on your inkjet or whatever. I'm kind of like that in between that generation. I'm not, it depends. And I don't know how the hell they come up with this stuff, but what's a millennial? What's not a millennial? Where are you at in that spectrum? To me, computers are totally natural. One of the best things I've ever done was kept the comprehensive review material that I got when I was studying my CFP. And it's from 2010 or 2009 or something like that. And yeah, all the tax laws have changed. Everything's been adjusted for CPI and inflation, all that stuff. But really it does give you a very, very good, quick and easy, hey, I can't remember how a cash balance plan works. I'm going to pull up, these two huge thick dictionary books I have and look up a cash balance plan. And it's not that I don't know how it works. It's just I don't remember the specifics. So I reference those a lot because, yeah, you could Google stuff. But to me, it's just if I see it in paper, it's a little bit more real for some reason. But yeah, I go back and look at those. It's there's nothing. There is not a section in there about student loans at all. And a lot's changed since I took the CFP. Income-based repayment was not a thing back then. And if it was, it wasn't what it is now. So, yeah, things change, and figuring out how to communicate that, it's hard. And you need to learn that stuff because it's actually really important. I remember you saying on one of the other, I don't know who you were interviewing, I listened to it, people come up to you, Alan, at conferences and all right, how much real financial planning can you do for somebody that's in their 20s or 30s? All right, I've had clients double their income since I've started with them. I've had clients pay off hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, change jobs, have babies, get married, all kinds of stuff. And the financial planning that we're taught in a lot of ways, especially through the CFP, which I'm a big fan of, the emphasis is not on the right syllable. It doesn't work. It's all about retirees, estate planning, insurance. Really, it's really focused on high net worth, which is great. That's where we all want to get our clients to. That's where we want to get to at some point, whatever that means to you. But the challenge to me is let's help people get there. They say financial ignorance. Let's teach that stuff.
No, I wish I had an applause, one of those fake applause buttons, or, we can have the outro music just hit right there when you say pay off, hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. Because I think that that's the key that so many folks are missing. And anyone that's ever gotten me on my high horse about this knows, like, I get so frustrated with that question around, like, what do you do for young people? It's like, we do a lot.
There's almost so much more to do.
There really is.
There's more to do.
It's so much more fun.
It's
and that
awesome.
is the thing. It's like with retirees, I always felt like I was doing the same thing over and over. And there just wasn't a lot going on. Like every 5 years, there was a new grandbaby, to talk about. But like with young people, there's so much happening. And like I said, the CFP is really designed to help people once they're already rich. But we kind of all have this passion for like, how do we get people rich? Like, how do we get them to that point? And how much more help can we give someone by starting with them young, by increasing their savings rate from, not contributing to their 401k to fully taking advantage of that 4% match. Like the amount that will make them over their lifetime would probably pay our fees for life, much less all the other stuff that we do for them. It's so hard to explain that, but you can hear it in your voice. You can hear it in the voice of advisors that do this type of work, because you just get so fired up about it because we see it every day. And it's just hard to explain it until you've actually done it.
Right. And it has nothing to do, like, use the word rich. Like, I have low expectations of myself. Like, I don't ever plan to be rich. I just want to plan to be happy. And whatever that means, like, if you want to retire at 50 and just be happy, those are like some of my favorite clients. Like, look, I don't need to have $120,000 of income every year. Like, I want to pay off my mortgage and I want to live on 48 grand a year and I want to retire when I'm 50. And that's happiness to me. Hell yeah. Let's figure out how to do that. And that's a long retirement, right? So there's a lot of possibilities over that. If you're living to 90 or 95, like, there's a lot of what ifs. But if that's your goal, let's try to figure out how to do that and let you know along the way. My job is to say, like, yeah, it's possible. It's not easy. And here's the ups and downs that you can experience throughout that 40 to 45 years of retirement. But that's your goal. And that's what you want to do. Let's do it together.
I think we take for granted the fact that we've even heard a client utter those words. Like, when a client comes into a normal planner's office and they have $1 million plus, I've never heard any of them say, like, what I want to do is make like $48,000 a year and retire at 50 and go like backpacking across Europe for 3 years. Like, those aren't the types of goals that, we just don't hear that in traditional planning, because we're working with clients that are already wealthy. They've already saved and made their money. They're probably going to get even wealthier under our watch just because they've already laid the foundation. But I don't think most planners are equipped or prepared to have the conversation with a client like that to say, like, hey, they may never have assets under management, or maybe they have $250,000 and that's it. And I'm not saying that produces $50,000 a year in income, but there's so many pieces that we can come up with of ways to building $48,000 a year in income that doesn't include having a big nest egg that's, throwing off gains.
Gazillions of dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's a totally different conversation and a different type of client than we're used to dealing with. And I don't know any place to go to learn how to have that conversation other than to just do it. And again, I'm a dive in the deep end kind of guy. So that's just my personality. But that's the fun part for many of us is helping people that really understand their life's dream. And that may not be, getting rich one day. Rich to them it looks very different than it does to our typical client, I guess.
Well, it's defining rich. What is rich to you? And like, what is wealthy? Is wealthy sustaining a very modest lifestyle and enjoying experiences that you can afford? Is it, maybe not flying around the world or going on a 6 months cruise and circling the globe? Is it going to, a campground, pulling in your pop-up camper and enjoying a weekend with your friends? If that's what you want to do and that's rich to you, let's figure out how to do that. If it's the other thing and, circling the globe is your deal, then yeah, obviously that's going to take more money and we can do that. That's just the math part. But let's like figure out what it is you want to do and what's going to make you happy, and then back into some type of income per year that's going to allow you to do that most of the time with a reasonable certainty that you can sustain that. And then put a little peanut butter and jelly on it and accept the fact that I don't know what the next election is going to hold, what the economy in the future is going to hold, what's going to happen. But let's like circle in on a cone of certainty and accept the fact that it may not always be perfect, but it's at least within the range of possibility. And let's go for it. And if you're willing to accept that cone of possibility, that's your decision. My job is to, like, with the tools that I have and my, call it expertise, which I feel is silly sometimes, just to kind of let you know, like, yeah, here's the things that could happen. And it may not work out perfect every time, but at least you have the opportunity. And if something doesn't work out the way we want it to, well, do you have the flexibility built into your lifestyle that you can, like, take a year off? Or are you cool with that? If that's, like, let's talk about those things. What would you do if it didn't work out the way that you wanted it to? How could we change, and what would be acceptable?
It would be so fascinating to see like a psychographic survey of all of your clients and you compared to like a traditional planner and their clients. Because, you know, if the old guy in a suit walks into your office that's, you know, rich looking for a financial planner, like, they're going to be really turned off by everything you just said. They're going to think you're high all the time. But when the right client walks in your office and you talk about that and the way that you view the world and how you view money and the way that they can use that in their life, then they're going to be extremely attracted to working with you and Epic Financial. So it's one of the things that sometimes whenever we talk niche and ideal client and all of that, we get very caught up on like, what profession do you want to work with? But psychographic is actually a really great way to identify ideal clients that if they can connect with you on that level and just their personality and what they're looking for out of life, then it can be a really great match. So I can only imagine the types of clients you actually get to work with.
Dude, well, let's talk about that because that's a problem I've had. So obviously, if you're, you know, an advisor out there looking to join the XYPN or like considering doing what I've done and a lot of others of us have done, I really struggled with that niche thing, Alan. Like, I don't know what my niche is. That's interesting you bring that up. Like, psychographically, I have a very white collar job, right? But I'm a very, at least in my own personal opinion, very blue collar type of guy. I don't have an extravagant lifestyle. I drive a truck. I have a pop-up camper and a boat. I like to fish. I like to hunt. I like to be outside. To me, like, having a huge house is not that important. Like, I'm not caught up in the material things. Like, country clubs are basically hell to me. I don't want to touch one with a 10-foot pole. Golfing, I just sold all my golf clubs to an Amish guy that was building a house across the street from me. Seriously, like, have fun, dude. And I don't know what that guy's going to do. Is he going to take, you know, his horse and buggy down the path and be slamming these golf balls I sold him and my clubs? Like, how does that work? Can you drive the electric cart? I don't know. But, like, I'm done with that stuff. I don't want any part of that. So I have this what I would consider a very white collar job. And I'm very, like, distasteful to others who do what I do because I feel like we've got this horrible used car salesman, you know, very bad Wall Street connotation about us. And I take that upon myself when it's really not true, which kind of goes to the, like, imposter type of syndrome. So to me, I've always really struggled with, like, what is my niche? And to me, it's not like a defined career path. It's not a profession. It's not an income level. It's not executives. Really, it is more of a psychological, hey, this is what I do during the day, but this is who I am in life. And that's what, like, if you can relate to me, if you like, let's have a conversation. I will talk to people all day long. Like, you give me a call, I will talk your ear off. And if we can find something to connect on, let's do it. But as far as, like, finding a niche, that's been hard for me and kind of been like a struggle because I know you're supposed to, like, you know, find your niche, right? Like, you're supposed to have a niche, and I don't really have one. And so what you're saying is, like, psychologically, people who just, like, maybe you're white collar, maybe you're blue collar, what doesn't matter to me. Like, if you like the same things, if you're into those same things, let's talk.
Yeah, they just might be the right personality. And that's, I think, a harder one to identify. I know some advisors will say, like, we want to work with do-it-yourselfers, or we want to work with the, independent folks or whatnot. Like, they try to define it there, but I think it can go a lot deeper. And again, it's even harder to identify and actually explain. But whenever you, I guess, have the freedom to express your personality through your website, through a blog, I think the way that you attract folks based on that type of based on a personality is that you really put yourself out there, and the people that are attracted to that personality will come work with you, and the people that aren't won't. And that's the beauty of marketing. So you just have to find ways to put yourself out there. It's not as simple for you as saying, I work with new parents, or I work with people that fish, or whatever that is. I mean, I guess you could say that. Maybe that should be part of your new marketing. But it may not be as simple as that, but there are probably other ways to kind of put yourself out there that your ideal client will be able to find you and connect with you and know that you're the right advisor for them.
Right. Well, and if you think like a lot of the stuff we talk about within the industry is really your like client engagement and your client acquisition and client stickiness. Like everything we're trying to do is build trust, right? So if what you put out there in your marketing is not truthful to who you are, then the very first impression that a new prospect or new client is going to get of you when they walk in your door is something completely different than you've marketed. And so you've already undermined your trust from step one.
Yeah, I mean, people always ask me, how do you build trust with clients when, you don't meet with all of them virtually and that sort of thing? And I always laugh and just say, the path to building trust is to be trustworthy. It's actually really simple, but we overcomplicate it. So to your point, you got to be true to yourself, publicly, because when they show up in your office, you can only hold out on that so long. It's actually pretty easy to hide behind false marketing, but once they see you and they work with you, they're going to know whether or not you were being honest. If I held myself out as somebody that loves to work with, I don't know, the creative types or artists who I just don't necessarily associate with folks that would probably be artists, and they would probably drive me mad just working with them as a financial planner. Like if I hold myself out and say, I love working with these people, and then they get in my office and I suck at it, right? It's never going to work.
You're going to bomb every meeting.
Yeah. So as we're kind of closing out this episode, I'll ask you my now infamous question. I'm the only one that's infamous too, but that's fine. At least one person cares, and my mother. So that's two. If, there's one piece of advice that you could go back and give, the Trace that was looking at starting his own practice probably, what is the one thing that you wish you had known then that you know now that you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
There's so much, man. You're going to make every mistake in the book. Like, learn how to get over yourself. You're going to do things wrong. You're not going to know. You're going to feel pretty much every day like you have no idea what you're doing. And you need to learn that that's okay, that you get better by failing. Fail every day and fail very quickly. Focus on things that actually matter. I tend, like I said at the beginning, I tend to be very detail oriented, and I care a lot about what things look like, which isn't that important. I care about what a PDF looks like. I care if it has the right logo and it's laid out the right way and everything. And even like, I'm not that good. I'm not a great writer. Like for some reason, I started caring about grammar and spelling and all that stuff. It's important. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to look like an idiot. But you can tend to, if you're detail oriented like me, and you make this transition to everything rests on your shoulders, you tend to get overly concerned about that and waste a lot of time making sure things are perfect. And they don't need to be perfect.
I want my applause, my fake applause meter again. I'm going to have to work this in. Maybe our audio team that helps us with editing these can add in some crowd applause from Jeopardy or whatever shows have that. Because both of those points are so good. It's so true that ultimately, and listeners have heard me say this over and over now, that we are trying to show more the real side of building a firm, and that it's not all rainbows and unicorns, and that it is hard and it's worth it. It's worth every pain that you experience, but you will experience a lot of pain in the process of starting a firm. But ultimately, it will never be perfect, and perfection will kill any startup, because ultimately it's just so hard. Sometimes 90% really is good enough. Sometimes 50% is actually good enough, but 80 and 90% is probably there. 100% is not always worth it. So,
all right, dude, I got a couple more. Hold on.
Oh, you got more coming. All right.
But I try to be very real when I talk about this. There's all kinds of stuff, and I'm not going to remember them all. One of them is just expect your cars to break down when you start a business. You're going to think, yeah, I'll start this business. Cash flow is really important, right? So one of my people that I look up to is Jude Boudreau. Dude, it's so true. And Alan, you've said this as well. Your burn rate is really important. Really important. And you don't know how long that burn rate is necessarily going to have to sustain itself. It might be a year. It might be 2. It might be 3. Who knows? Your burn rate's really important. Expect your cars to break down, because that started happening as soon as I transitioned. Also, and this is probably the most important part, and I know that you will reiterate this, find a group of people. I have the best mastermind group, whatever you want to call it, 5 other advisors that without them, I would have quit 2 years ago. I would have been done. I would have quit, because without them, they give you encouragement. They help you. And if you can give them a shout out on the links and stuff, that would be awesome, because they're seriously, without them, I've been done. Find people that are in your situation, close to your situation. If you are just starting, find people who are just starting. Then find somebody, it doesn't have to be a group of people, but find somebody that is close to your personality set that's a few years ahead of you, that you can learn from. And you can go back and be all right, this is how they did it, right? This is where they were during this time. Because every day is a struggle, and you're going to feel like you're failing all the time. And the biggest piece of advice I can give is, the longer you can keep the doors open, the more chances of success you have. And that's it. You just got to keep those doors open.
Yeah, I remember when we had Chris GP on the show, he was one that just totally crushing his first year of growth. And yet, the thing he has to wait on is the one thing he can't rush, and that's time. Sometimes you just have to wait for it to all actually matriculate into money in the bank, because it just takes time, and there's just no way to rush it. There's no way around it. There's no way to avoid it.
And there's nothing you can do. You could put up a marketing plan, right? You could have a great marketing plan, and you could put it in place. And then once you put it in place, what do you have to do? Wait on time. Let it work. It's not immediate.
But it is good it's a great reminder for the planners out there that we think about when I have 100 clients, I'll be making this much money. But you got to remember, you're not going to have 100 clients. If you get 27 clients like Chris did in his first year, you don't have 27 clients the first month. You maybe get one, and then maybe you get one more the next month. And so by the end of 12 months, you have a decent client base, and it's growing and that sort of thing. And you can start to see it working. But it didn't happen in the first month. It didn't happen in the 6th month. And truth be told, it's not going to happen in the 12th or the 18th month either. It takes longer than that. And that's just part of it.
It's a culmination of everything that you've done in the past and everything you're putting into place in the current. And then it's just a matter of waiting to the future to let it all work out. And that's where, and Alan, I've heard you say this, even early on in your career, 5-6 years ago, when you were starting all this, if you can keep the doors open long enough to get to the future, it will start to work. It may not work as quickly as you expected or you want it to, but just accept that. And if you can manage your own personal emotions and personal finances long enough to let it work, it will. but it's not easy, and your cars are going to fucking break down.
It's so true. Oh, these things I remember I think like a month after or 2 months after I launched my firm, I had like a couple of flat tires all at once, had to replace tires on my F-150. So, there's $1,200.
It's uncanny.
It always happens. I'm trying to remember what else happened right after. Oh, my cat. And I always swore I would never be the guy that spends a lot of money on a cat, and
oh yeah,
of course, like I remember he went into the kitty ICU $2,000 later. I wrote a blog post about it because I just had to be like, look, yeah, I swore I'd never spend this money. And here I am spending the money that was supposed to be meant for me to launch a firm. And here I am trying to keep this freaking cat alive. And, looking at it now is silly because he died like 8 months later of a different cause, but it seemed worth it at the time. So you just never know what that stuff is gonna happen. So you've got to have enough runway to be able to withstand it and recognize that those things will set you back because emotionally and financially those things they take their toll. So anything else you want to add to the list, because you're on a roll and these are just awesome recommendations.
Yeah, sure. Emotions are hard. That's what I've learned about myself quite a bit. I was never an emotional person. If you start down this path and you're kind of like me, like very quiet and my wife likes to say she married me because I'm very emotionally steady. That went out the window as soon as I started my own company. I have learned so much about myself, which is so great. Like, I have no regrets for that one reason alone. I have learned so much about myself. Even if this doesn't work out and I go completely bankrupt and things go horribly wrong, and thank God I'm like past that point now, because for a while you're going to feel like that. Like you're going to feel like you have made a huge mistake and you are going bankrupt and you're a financial planner and you should not go bankrupt because you know what to do. Unless you just have really rich parents or a great investor or something, if you're doing this from scratch, you're going to feel like that. And once you kind of like get over that hump and you realize, oh, okay, it's not that bad, you start to learn about yourself a lot. And you realize like, oh, I do have emotions. This is hard. I need to learn how to manage that stuff. And you grow as a person, which is probably the biggest thing I've learned through this whole process. Again, whether it goes on to make me $1 gazillion and have a national firm, or if I just become a solo practitioner or maintain a solo practitioner and does really well kind of behind the scenes, I don't care. Like, I know who I am so much more now, 3 years later, than I did before. And that's like some of the best parts about doing this. Even through all the pain and the psychotic stuff that you go through with your wife and just being a complete nut job the whole time. It's worth it for that reason. And it'd be worth it if I failed. It's worth it as I succeed. Whatever happens with my firm or my career, this is going to be a high point because I did something on my own. And I proved to myself that I could. And when you start to do that, you think like, well, if I try to prove something to myself and I fail, it's not worth it. Like I didn't prove anything to myself. And then you get to the point where you've done it and you realize you're probably over the failure apex. Like you're not going to fail anymore. It's just going to be hard for a while, maybe. Even if you fail after that, you still know that it's one of the best things that you've done in life. Mic drop. Done.
No, there's just nothing to add to that. Honestly, like that is so true. And it's one of those things that there's so many cliches out there about how you view failure, but ultimately failure really is just a learning experience. And part of being an entrepreneur is being able to learn from failure and make it a success, no matter how much of a failure it seems to be at the time. So Trace, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and to share, kind of many of the hardships that you've experienced with starting your own firm, but the success as well that I think is going to be long term. I have no doubt that in 3 more years, you'll still be sitting here as the CEO and president of Epic Financial, if that's what you ultimately want. Never know where life may take you, but thank you again for taking the time.
My pleasure, dude. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing this. It's awesome.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate Trace, as well as many of our other guests, for being willing to come on this show and really bare their soul to listeners. Sometimes we take for granted that so many advisors are willing to come on the show and tell their story, but it's not easy to just open up about everything that he did. And honestly, it's a real honor to get to bring those stories to all of our listeners. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.